Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the Grasshopper 94 from Full Speed RC. Running 50mm 5-bladed props on unbranded 1104 7800 kV motors, 10 amp 4-in-1 ESC, F3 flight controller with an OSD, 600 TV line camera with a 25 milliwatt 40 channel VTX. You have to add a receiver. It's running Betaflight 3.1.5. It has a buzzer and an LED. JST for your battery connection. Main plate looks like 1.5 millimeters. Side plate's probably 1.5 millimeters. The camera is adjustable. It weighs 61.3 grams. It comes with a 500 milliamp 50C rated 2S battery, prop guards and screws for your prop guards, an extra set of props, extra rubber bands, and Velcro. Motor post to motor post, it is 94 millimeters. So there's one thing I need to cover right away before we get started, and it is the battery. And maybe you're already aware of this because of other reviews. This battery will get you in the air, but if you have flight experience and you're going to be hitting the throttle anywhere hard at all, I would suggest not using this battery whatsoever. You end up with the roll of death. And also the configuration for the battery voltage that they had on here is kind of peculiar. You know, 2.8 for the minimum cell and 3 for the warning. That's pretty low, and this battery definitely can't handle. This battery sags pretty hard, and when it sags very low, then the ESCs apparently desync or reset, and then you get the death roll. So while this battery, if you're just beginning your FPV journey, will allow you to get into flight, if you're trying to do any hard throttle moves, you'll probably have troubles. So what I ended up doing is I ended up flying with these batteries. These are the eSheen, as you see there, in the bright silver layer label. I've actually got 4 of these. I think I've got one misplaced or in the wrong bag. They're rated 80C. I don't buy that for a second. You know, the C ratings have almost become part of the name brand. Like you look at the battery and you say, okay, it's got this many cells, this many milliamp, and it has this rating, so you know which battery you're going after. Not that 80 means anything. But these are pretty cheap. I actually found the manufacturing on these to be a little bit better than I did my 3 cells. Maybe it was just a bad run that I got on my 3 cells. But they're pretty light. They're 450s. They're not 500s. So your flight time would possibly be slightly reduced. But these are some of the smallest 500 2-cell batteries. Anyways, I also use my lipos, but I know that these are kind of difficult to get, especially here in the States, because you have to pay extra shipping, because he does ship them as you're supposed to as hazardous materials. And one thing I want to draw your attention to when it comes to batteries, you know, oftentimes JSTs get kind of a bad rap, in my opinion. Sometimes I think it's these little tiny wires that manufacturers are putting on here. Let's see if I can read this. I think it says 20 gauge right there. And I've seen actually worse. I've seen 22 on some 2-cell batteries. And I think we can see it on one of these. I looked at it earlier. There it is. And so this is 18 gauge wire. And you can see the fit into the JST is pretty tight, and this one is actually kind of loose. Hopefully you can see that these would just plop in, whereas these are going to take some work to get in there. And the MyLipo batteries are the same way. Let's take a look here. 18 gauge wire. I don't know if you can read that or not, but it does say 18 gauge wire. And so wire is a limiting factor as far as the current that you can get to the vehicle, and also the connector. I've flown a lot larger vehicles on JSTs and they work just fine. So it stipulate, you know, depending upon your components, you may still have troubles with JSTs, but in this particular case, it's just this battery. The battery sags too much, and then you get the roll of death if you try to do any flips or rolls. You may just fall out of the sky. Actually, on my first flight, I also found that once the battery went off, I was just almost full throttle and it just went down. I couldn't even fly it over to where I was sitting. So with the batteries aside, you know, get yourself some decent batteries with this thing. It's good and fun. They took the time to tune it, which I really appreciate, because that allows us just to set up our receiver, set up your rates, go fly. And that makes life simple. They included a buzzer, they've got an OSD, we've even got a single LED light that flashes white and blue in the back. So they've checked a lot of boxes with this, but one box they didn't check. Let me get organized here. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. And obviously what I'm going to do is a conductivity test here, because I already know. I'm pretty certain that this isn't carbon fiber. So if I push this down in here, and I'm going to get these kind of close to try to... Nothing. But I've got another full-speed RC vehicle right here. That's carbon fiber. And I don't think they're trying to confuse us at all, because, you know, you look at this and it's got kind of that carbon fiber weave over the top. I suspect this is kind of a mix between carbon and that fiberglass. But I'm not very concerned about it, but I wanted you to be aware, because I've crashed this a whole bunch of times. I spent quite a few flights trying to find the right to low voltage setting, so where if I did a flip or a roll and that buzzer wasn't going off, that I wouldn't get a death roll. So I ended up crashing quite a bit in order to find that kind of sweet spot, and I'll post that here on the screen. But that's going to vary depending upon what batteries you're running. If you're running different batteries, or you have more runs on your batteries, they might sag a little bit more now. or maybe mine are sagging more than yours are, so you might have to adjust those numbers up and down. But as long as the beeper isn't going off with those settings, you should be able to do a flip or a roll, and you won't get the death roll. But if you wait for the beeper to come on, then you will get the death roll. And also that depends on what you do right before the flip or the roll or any sort of aggressive move. Did you just come out of a really aggressive move and your battery hasn't regained from the sag of the aggressive move, and it's gotten depleted to a point, but yet the buzzer's not off? There's some factors in there is what I'm trying to say. So these settings might not be the end-all be-all to making sure that doesn't happen to you, but it should get you really, really close. If it doesn't, be aware that you may have to make an adjustment for your batteries in order to not get that death roll. Overall, I'm very pleased with the product. I'm really glad that we finally got something that flies well. I've kind of felt like if I didn't build it myself recently, we just kept getting machine you had to work on after machine you had to get work on, and the King Kong and the Fly Egg, and maybe we had range issues, or it kind of felt like the micro category was rushing to market. It hasn't really understood where it needed to be with its components yet. But maybe we've got a company here in Full Speed that has taken note. So thumbs up for Full Speed. I like this vehicle. I'm going to keep flying this vehicle. This is going to probably be a mainstay here for at least the short run until I find something I like more. I'm working on, I don't want to make it sound too obscure, but I'm working on a project that I hope is going to be viable, but I'm not sure just yet. It might be too much, at least for me. If you're looking for a fun, small space flyer, I think this is a great candidate. I think with that camera angle, that kind of pushes it over the top. The fact they tuned it, that's worth a few dollars, don't you think? I think there's many of you that would, I'm right in there in that category too. I would rather have something that came tuned than to have to do it myself. Sure, if I find that their tune differs from mine, I might make some slight changes, but having a good starting point is really important because it really changes your flight experience. And I don't think this vehicle would be difficult to tune if they didn't, but they took the time to do that, and for that I applaud them. We've got a good camera, the power to weight ratio. It doesn't quite have enough power to throw itself over the house. I kind of have to fly it over the house. But you know, these are what, 1.9 inch props, and as much thrust as they generate when you're when you're spinning kind of sideways and you're kind of not on the throttle, it doesn't really generate any thrust as you just kind of idling through the air. But the punch outs are pretty good. I was pretty happy with those punch outs. It really felt like the much bigger propped vehicles, and it just flies pretty well. And I think with these 5-bladed props, they're fairly inefficient. We've always known that about 5-bladed props. But what the 5-bladed props do is it kind of makes it drive like a car. You just point it in a direction and you steer it, and it just goes there because it's got so much grip, if you will, with all these different blades working for us. Of course, if you're looking for longer flight times, you can find some 2-bladed or 3-bladed props or 4-bladed props where you can cut some down, and you can probably get some efficiency gains by having less blades, and your flight time will go up even more. If you didn't see it in the video, I include the flight time in the OSDs so that you can see when I'm flying in a particular way how long that flight lasts, because sometimes I fly slower than others. I think I was hitting the throttle pretty hard with this one. Good time. I enjoy it. I think if you're interested, you should run out and pick one up. Okay, if you have any comments, suggestions, questions, or otherwise, please leave those in the section down below. If you're interested in this vehicle, I'll put a link down below as well. This one came from Gear Best, so that's where my link will point. And thanks for watching. Okay, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions...